Okay, so my first question is always how you were diagnosed and kind of what led up to it. I know you were diagnosed through your son getting diagnosed, but yeah, talk me through that. How old was your son, and how long ago was this?
So my son, how long ago was this? This is a good question. This is where the working memory part doesn't work so well. My son was in fifth grade, so this was like 6, 7 years ago, and he was diagnosed as at the school. They can't ask you to get your child diagnosed, but they were asking us to get it diagnosed, and then he was, and it was like, oh, that sounds about right. But then we didn't do anything much about it. My husband's like, it'll be fine, and we'll just do some other things, and it wasn't fine. We had to there was a lot of upset during middle school,
Hmm.
but what happened was he was diagnosed, and when I got those rating scales, I was like, oh, that's me. But third question, I was like, oh, you have this also. So that's what's funny, is that I kind of suspected it. I'd heard about it, but I kind of dismissed it. I am a therapist, and we went to school. At least when I went to school a long time ago, we talked about ADHD for, I don't know, it's a paragraph, and it was a child's disease. So I didn't even consider it would be something that I would have to deal with. But having to take care of him, making sure that he was getting through school, I didn't have time to get a diagnosis for myself. It wasn't even a thought until, as you do get older. I'm a therapist, and I was talking, and I couldn't find any words to say. I was just speaking around and around and around in circles, and it scared me. I thought I had early onset Alzheimer's. So that led me to do some research about what this could be. And then when it said that with ADHD and women and your hormones, then I was like, oh, I need to definitely find out what's going on, and do I have it? It wasn't easy to get diagnosed. Um, I had to drive about an hour away from my house to get someone to diagnose me under my insurance. Because I mean, I could get diagnosed if I would spend $5,000, but I didn't.
Hmm.
So I drove about an hour and found this lovely psychotherapist, no, psychologist. And as soon as we talked for 5 minutes, she was like, well, I'm pretty sure you have it, but we'll run through the test. Um, and so when I found out, many women come to me and are like, it's that light bulb and the revelation. And for me, it was just like, oh, yeah, like you already knew this. So it's just kind of like a confirmation of what you already knew.
Hmm.
So, which is a good thing to have, but it wasn't that huge sigh of relief. It was more like, now what can we do about it? I'm always, I guess, in the vein of like moving fast, like what can we do to help this, because I couldn't go around without having any words. So that was great. But I will say, what was interesting for me is that I was having a pretty good life. I was working. I was a psychotherapist. I had my son. I had another job. You know, I have a husband. Like, there was a lot of things happening that were great. So when I thought about ADHD, there were a lot of things that were happening that weren't great. So that part was the part that was confusing. It wasn't until I started doing my research that this is common with a lot of women, that we're doing all of the things, we're getting things done, but all of that internal struggle, all of that feeling of inadequacy, and all of that moving, all those moving parts, like if one thing fell out of all the juggling, everything would fall apart. That was the part that was killing me. Just running around like that and doing all that, and I didn't really know that that's what it was. I just thought I wasn't keeping up with my psychotherapy notes as well as other people. I didn't realize all the rest of the things were really um, just really feeling like somebody, was like dying inside. I call it the hamster wheel from hell. And yeah, I find that's kind of that was my experience, which sometimes I find some other people are like, they look back, it's like, oh, they didn't really know what was happening, and they were so surprised. For me, it was like, oh, I didn't know that this part, that part of the anxiety is what was happening for me.
Yeah. I think the fact that it took you 2 years to actually get the diagnosis feels very ADHD to me in itself. uh, right? Which is, that's like you said, like moving very fast, and also just the overwhelm of life. I mean, I think one of the things I personally, God, I related to so many of things that you were saying. The one of the things that I find I struggle with now, as you know, a woman who has, my children are older now, so they're like 14 and 10. So I feel like I'm in this kind of sweet spot where they're not toddlers, which was horrible, but you know, they're also not adults yet. But so I'm, you know, I'm still kind of tied to them. Um, but I feel like I have a lot more like support in my life right now. And so sometimes I sort of wonder, like, how much am I even struggling? I feel like I've got this kind of devil angel on my shoulder. And there's the angel that's like, oh, this ADHD diagnosis has explained all of your struggles throughout your life and why motherhood was so difficult when they were babies and why you struggled in school. And now, you know, the executive function. And it was just like all of this checklist. And yes, ADHD explains everything. And this is the answer you've been looking for your whole life, all that time that you felt, you know, that you were misdiagnosed with depression, anxiety, blah, blah, blah. And so it feels like, yes, I have that overwhelming relief and euphoria feeling. But then there's the devil on my other shoulder, which is like, are you really struggling or are you just lazy? Like that voice still comes back, which is like, yeah, you probably, everybody feels this way, you know, like what makes you any different from any other mom? What makes you think you're struggling more? You know, the only reason why it feels like you're struggling more is because you can't get your act together, you know. Like I still feel, despite the diagnosis, that voice still is very, very loud in me. um yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, um, because you know, like I said, I'm a psychotherapist, but I'm not an ADHD coach now, and the difference is really when I started coaching ADHD was really looking into what that is. Why is it this? You know, the struggle's not enough, right?
Right,
It's like,
yeah.
is your struggle actually real? Because you know, you're not necessarily the person who can't pay any bill or can't, yeah, your checkbook's not done, or yes, you have stuff all over the counter, but there's some people that can't even cook dinner. And it's like your struggle is your struggle. Your struggle is your struggle, and your struggle is real and it's valid. Sometimes, and that's that thing where sometimes you can get it all done, all of it, and then sometimes none of it gets done. So acceptance to me was it's a big part. It's a really, really big part that it's consistently inconsistent or consistently inconsistent, either way you want to say it. But that your struggle is your struggle, that struggle is real, but it doesn't have to be that it now envelops your entire life. Your ADHD is always going to be there, but being able to have, that radical self-compassion that happens, that there are dishes in the sink, or for me, it's the mail or the clutter, or the other parts that are really great where I can do all kinds of Herculean feats, like talk to, I'll like 10 clients in a day. It's a breeze, because I like it, or like do some things for my son. It's, leading into the parts that really, really work for you, your strengths, and then bolstering up the parts that hold you back. So your deficits, but being okay that some days you don't even know which ones, which one's which. So, it's that acceptance piece, so that when you hear that voice, like, are you just lazy? It's like, lazy is not a thing. I think everybody's doing the best that they can when they can do it. So that's not even a word that I use,
Hmm.
because we are doing our best. And some days our best is that, there's just takeout, right? There's no, I didn't cook the gourmet meal, even though I have all the ingredients, or nobody got to bed on time, or um, I make dinner a lot of times at 9 or 10 o'clock at night. That doesn't work for other people, but it works at my house, because if you want to eat, that's when you're eating, because that's when I have the time and the energy to usually cook. So it's leaning into your strengths or what works for you, and not really comparing what other people are doing. Because once you start comparing with anybody, even when if you compare with somebody else that's ADHD, that's when you're sunk in the water, because you're definitely going to feel like whatever they're doing is better than what we're doing. It's that kind of negativity bias where we're always thinking what we do is wrong, which is not true, but it begins to be that voice in your head. And I always caution everybody that voice in your head, what it's telling you, you've got to guard that. to the utmost, because that is really what's going to run your life. That voice is telling you things are bad, they're going to be bad. If you can change that voice to say that things are good, or at least that things are okay, then things will be good or okay. And that's a much better way to live.
I love that. We actually have a self-deprecation jar in my house where, because my son loves to call himself lazy. He's in the fourth grade, and and I'm like, you're not lazy. I've seen you spend hours building things in Minecraft that are insane. Like, you cannot use the L word anymore in this house. I still use it myself all the time in my head, but yeah, it's definitely outlawed in my house. So just to backtrack a little bit, what was it that alerted teachers when your son was in the fifth grade? What were they thinking was ADHD at the time? Because I know it's so different in boys.
Yeah, so I'm sure they were thinking it long before fifth grade. Um, it's funny. Schools just aren't usually set up for people with ADHD. So, being able to sit down in class, being able to pay attention to something that you don't care about. Because, that's the thing, like you're saying, your son, when he's building something for hours, that's great. But when there's like some, schoolwork, there's no reward behind that. There's maybe
Right.
something he doesn't care about. So then you think you're lazy because you don't want to do that report, or, if you have any learning differences. Um, so being able to, not comprehension, but learning differences in your learning styles. My son also has a visual processing disorder. It just takes a little longer. But when they're expecting your child to be able to do things as fast maybe as others, it just takes a little while for him to process. And many people with ADHD, you take a little longer to process. Then you feel like you're lazy, or you're crazy, or you're stupid. And those are the things. And then they call that to your attention, like there's something wrong with your child. As opposed to, hey, let's look at what's going on for your child so that we can best support them. It's like, and the fact that they can't even really say we want to have them evaluated. I understand why they don't allow teachers to do that, but that right there makes you and your child feel like there's something wrong with them,
Mm-hmm.
and that's something that definitely needs to be looked at.
Yeah, my with remote learning this year, my son had me basically as his full-time tutor. And it's, while he hasn't officially been diagnosed, I know he has ADHD just from what I've learned of it in my own journey. And so I've been able to help him in ways that I probably wouldn't have been able to help him before my own diagnosis. And he's done amazingly this year as a result of my help. And so I really struggled when he was going back into school 4 days a week now. Like, have I raised his expectations too high because now he needs me as his help? And so is he going to kind of feel like does he have this false sense of security? And I was like, of course, because I'm a mom and a woman, I was taking it all on myself, being like, I've done a terrible thing by helping him. And I just stopped and I was like, no, like, this has been an amazing learning experience in terms of how much and what kind of help he actually needs in order to get the result. It's not like I was doing his work for him. It was just really eye-opening for me to realize, the kind of help he's going to need moving forward and the kind of one-on-one attention he's going to need moving forward, but also like how ingrained it is in me that we shouldn't need help, that ultimately we should be able to do things on our own, and that really, like, if you need help, therefore you are deficient somehow. I'm like, that is the society in which we are formed, right? I mean, that's so ingrained in us.
Yeah, and it's not great for kids or adults, because that's what happens. Then we grow up and can't figure out why we feel depressed or upset or have anxiety, where you're trying to do all this alone. We weren't meant to be here and do things alone. We were meant to, do things with other people. That's why community is so healing in the ADHD space. Like when you're around people that are like you, that might
Mhm.
talk over people, or and they don't care that you've done that, or they might be a few minutes late. It's not now a character flaw.
Right.
You might come to their house, it's disorganized. You're not like, oh, you're dirty. That kind of community, finding people who are just like you, that's where the healing space comes in. And it's just so sad that, it starts with our kids, and it becomes so ingrained in us that then sometimes you don't want to put that on them. but you're grappling yourself, because we are humans too. Like, we're moms, but we're humans, and we're moms with ADHD. So, we're doing it the best that we can, the best way that we can, and trying to model for them that sometimes we're great, sometimes we mess up, and that's okay, because a lot of times, like you said, they'll, we'll like, go, no, did I do the wrong thing? It's like, sometimes you do the wrong thing, sometimes you do the right thing. Sometimes, like, let's look at it and see what was actually done. So, like, giving them um, some of what we're learning, especially now that we know about our ADHD. I wish I had known when my son was younger about my ADHD. Because again, I didn't get, whether it wasn't 2 years, he got diagnosed in 5th grade. He is in 11th grade now. So I've been diagnosed about 2 years. So maybe it was like closer to 3 or 4 years. But I kind of wish that I knew I definitely wish I knew what I know now, to be able to help him. As you know, when they're teenagers, they want to walk by you and just go, mom,
Mm.
until they need you. But I am still able to give a lot of what I have, but I would have given anything to have the time that you had with your kid during this time, for that bond too. Not only to just help him, it's like the bond that you formed is the bond that you'll take forward. As things get harder and they need your help, you'll have that bond, which will really help you to help him.
Gosh, I hope so. I mean, I always like to joke about the fact that no matter what, we're going to, our kids are going to be in therapy. No, or what I like to joke, like, no matter what you do, you're going to end up sending your kids to therapy. And I had a friend recently say, that's a good thing. Like, why, like, yes, if we had a generation of children who were normalizing going to therapy and not feeling like they had to wait until they were broken, that's a great thing. And I was like, touche.
Yes, I love her.
Um, so now you had a similar experience, at least with undergrad, as I did, which was dropping out of quite a few times. I like to say I had a complicated relationship with academia. You obviously went much further with your academia, but looking back over your youth, what were some signs of ADHD now?
Uh, yeah, how much time do we have? Well, it's funny because I'm a little older than you. I'm in my 50s, and so when I was growing up, there didn't have ADHD. It was just like, figure it f out. Like, that's what I had, figure it out, and
Mm.
so that's what I did. But when I look back, I started school early. My mom kind of pushed for it, because that's what you did back then. You made sure you felt like you were pushing your kid up. Um, Knowing probably the developmental delays, I probably could have waited, but I was far smart enough to start. But being that smart, that I was the only kid that passed the test to be able to do that, the administrators said they had ever had, nobody had ever passed. Then you're in school, and once you get to like 3rd or 4th grade, um, where then they're making judgments about you, because I was late and I was disorganized and I forget to turn in homework. I'd be up all doing the homework, and you start saying, what's wrong with, something's wrong with me. I'll never forget, I was the crossing guard, and then I was late every day to be out there early. And the teacher brought me up in front of the room and took the little crossing guard thing away and said, obviously she doesn't care. And I was like,
Oh,
mortified. And it was like, oh, something's wrong with me.
yeah.
So that kind of started the beginning of where I really was like, what's happening here? And then when you move up to high school, just all the time, like, you're the girl with so much potential. Like, we know you can do all these things, but you just don't seem to do them. And I was like, okay.
What is my
uh,
potential? Where are you seeing this? Why am I not seeing this? Yeah.
well, I knew, this is the thing. I always knew I had potential. I always knew I could do whatever it is I wanted to do. I always felt it was then. What's your problem?
No.
So, that was the thing. I was always an eternal optimist, that I always felt like something was not quite right. I never knew what. I was always confused. I feel like I spent many years more confused than necessarily upset. Because I was always like, yeah, but I knew I didn't care about that stuff. And I didn't think it mattered so much. I just kind of went the way it went. You go to high school, you go to college, you get out, you get corporate America, you work 25 years, you get your gold watch, and you're done. And then it was like, oh no, you go to college and there's no supports. But I didn't know that. I knew that I was alone. I had just turned 17, like a couple weeks before, and I was alone at college, 5 states away. Yay. So with no supports, it's like, what's getting done? Nothing. Nothing's getting done. You're trying to create social relationships, which I didn't realize I wasn't good at because I had a good, close group of friends, but we all grew up together. Not understanding about, what it was to be in school and what to pick out your classes and then how you're going to organize your homework, your work, and then have a social life. Ugh, that wasn't good at all. So this thing, I never dropped out, but I never dropped out. I had the benefit of wonderful parents who I love and adore because they just kept paying. But it wasn't now, it's like $60,000 a year. Wasn't that? But they would just, I pass enough and then they just pay. And then I pass enough and they just pay. And then I drop classes. And so I'd only have a few. So I was always able to stay above the 2.0, but yet stay in school for 8 years. Like that's a feat, right? I don't know how I did it, but I did have the benefit of parents that just, kept saying like, you can do this. But I will say there was a day when, it's funny, I'm old enough that they had phone booths. Yes, I was at a phone booth, even though I had a phone in my home. I was at school in Virginia, shout out to Virginia State. But I was at the phone booth and talking to my father, and he was like, all right, well, it's time for you to come home. And I was like, no, I don't want to come home. And he's like, yeah, like pretty much I want to be done paying. I was like, no. And then I kind of calmed down and I said, listen, if you give me this one chance, he's like, I'm going to figure this out. Give me one more semester. And if I don't, then, I don't have anything to say. So my father was wonderful. And he was like, okay. And that was the day I figured it out. I think because then there was some accountability. I had grown up a bit because I've been there for over 4 years. And then I realized all the things that I knew about myself to do. I need to attend class to pass. I'm not that person that can just read the notes. I knew that, but it's like, now you have to do it. Guess what? You have to be in class on time. I would go to class. My clothes might be all wrinkly. People will laugh. It's like, yeah, I'm at that 8 o'clock class because that was the only way I was going to get there. I was going to get up and look cute. No, that was ever happening. It was like, go get there, like brush your teeth maybe, but then come home and you can get ready. Ask for help. Like ask the teachers for help when you don't understand. Get a group together. Whenever there's a group project, I used to hate it, but then I learned you get a group project, everybody's going to do a piece and somebody's going to hold you accountable and pick the piece you're good at. We had a finance class. I didn't know how to do finance, but I knew how to speak. And the big project was to do this. I don't remember, like an analysis, but somebody had to then come up and give a presentation. So if I said, I'll speak, and nobody else wants to public speak. And they're like, you do? I was like, yes, if you guys do all that work and then explain it to me, I'll get up there and speak. Now, I don't know what they were saying, but I could memorize stuff like at the moment and then spit it all out. And then I'd forget. Working numbers work like that. But I did that. And even when a teacher kept asking questions, because teachers clearly know I didn't know what I was doing, because I could remember all that they said down to the very last like decimal. It's like, oh, and we got an A. And I finally passed that class. I only took it like 3 times. So it's, learning though, like that was my strength. My strength was A, I knew I could remember it. B, I knew I could go up there and present it in a way and be able to deal with the fire from the teacher, which then made everybody there happy. And then they liked me too. So it was, it was a benefit all over. So leaning into the strengths I knew I had, little did I know that those were coping mechanisms for ADHD. But then what I find interesting is fast forward to graduate school, which was a long way after that. I had to then write the best essay they said they'd ever seen because my grades were so bad to get into graduate school. But I went to graduate school. I graduated on time, even though I had a baby, I got pregnant and had a newborn. And I missed 1 day of class. And because I had a baby that day, the next week I was in class and they were like, why are you here? And I said, because you said we could only miss 2. And I made if the baby gets sick, I'd need another one. The teacher said, really? We really would have given you an extra day. So it's just different and your interest-based attention. Like I was interested in grad school. It was really important to me. It was something I wanted to do. I have my master's in social work. The rest of the classes, like an undergrad, I'd rather be out like hanging out with my friends. But it's the things I know now about ADHD that make those where I'm like, oh, that's why that happened. But again, it's that figuring it out, like looking at like, okay, what did work? And then using all of them and knowing that in my 20s has really helped me through to now in my 50s.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. I feel like my motivation shifted. I went for my first year, my freshman year, and then dropped out after my freshman year because I was like, I'm wasting my parents' money. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not going to class. I'm just hanging out and partying. And then once I took a year off, I kind of had that moment of like, okay, what do I want to do with the rest of my life? I feel like I want to go back to university and just get this BA. And so that was my motivation at that point. And I had a lot of those sort of same coping mechanisms of like, okay, now I know if I'm going to go back, I need to sit front row center in every single lecture, and I need to actually go to classes, and I need to, like it took all of my focus and energy to really perform. But my motivation was the fact that I'm like, I'm here, I'm back, I'm going to pull myself up by those bootstraps and all of that grit, when you sort of feel like I've got that motivation finally. And I think it eludes us sometimes to feel like, when, because like you said earlier, like you can't really predict when you're going to have that motivation and when you're not. And sometimes you would think like, why am I not able to replicate this behavior from one moment to the next? And that's where the interest based part comes in too. So it feels very so nuanced.
It is. It's different for each person and it's different for you every time. So, there are times when I have to throw rewards behind it for myself now. It's like, oh, you'll get to go out or, spend some money or something like that. And most of the time for me though, accountability is what I need.
Yeah.
I'm a coach that has a coach, right? So I know there's somebody gonna just say, hey, that thing you said you were gonna do, are you gonna do it? And then it's like, oh yeah, because I'm not gonna go back and say they're not gonna do it. I mean, that's how it's funny. I have worked out, and I didn't know that was part of like managing your ADHD. I have had a trainer for 20 years, and there's a point where you're kind of like, oh gosh, do I have to pay for this? But the reason why I'm able to work out for over 20 years is because 2 times a week somebody is waiting for me with an appointment, but I'm not going to miss my appointment. And so I've worked out only when I was pregnant and when I was nursing in the beginning. It's the only time I've missed, pretty much that long working out, which it's funny because a lot of times they're like, oh, we do stuff and then we stop. It's like you put in the accountability that works for you or the different things that, help you get there, whether it's accountability or, like I said, some type of reward or like knowing your why. You'd be surprised how long you can sustain something. But it's just knowing about what it is that works and then using it and then knowing if you need to do something else to change it up. I mean, I will say I've had different trainers over that time. It's the same place, but sometimes we change trainers. And I think that that's part of it too. That probably when I was like, oh, I'm bored, it's like, oh, here comes a new person, right? We're going to do something different. So we can sustain things. It's just figuring out the ways that we're be able to do it. I've had a job for over 20 years too. My life's pretty interesting. So I had my undergrad degree, lots of jobs, either I'm quitting or I'm getting fired, working for a while. And it's like, oh, I'm bored. So then once I got bored, then I know I was going to have to quit or, be fired. I didn't realize that was the ADHD. But I was going to go to law school, which is a thing that I don't know why they would say you could use your JD, right? Everybody, you could always use it somewhere. Where would you use it if you weren't going to be an attorney? I don't understand. But I would get all like I'm old enough where they send in the mail that send you the old tests, take the LSAT, and I would just get them and never take it. And then, but I knew parents had paid enough; they weren't going to pay for law school, so I was going to have to pay. And the girl who did my nails was like, "You should do nails. You can do it whenever you want, and you'll have enough money to pay for yourself." Well, when I went to cosmetology school, I ended up liking it, so I'm going to do this for a few months before law school. And I've worked in a salon for over 20 years. In the same salon, I worked only in 2 salons for most of the 20 years because I found somewhere where I felt comfortable. And it was different every day, different people speaking all the time, doing different services. And it's just actually, unfortunately, with the pandemic, we're going to close in a few weeks. That gives me more time to concentrate on what I'm doing here with ADHD. But I was still working on Saturdays because I wanted to. For many, they were like, stop working now. I was like, well, I like it. Why do I have to stop?
Yeah.
But it just goes to show that not all it. Sometimes I feel like people just feel like we are fuck ups. Another term to use, like we just can't do anything, and that's just not true. We just
Mhm.
have to figure out the best ways that it works for us, and part of that's acceptance of your ADHD and the way that it manifests for you. Then you know how to work with it, and that's what's really important is to figure out. Yes, this is real. Yes, this is happening to you. Like it's just, but it's just your brain. It's just the way that your brain is. And then once you can go, okay, that's fine. It's like, how does this work for you? Yes, I have a college degree and I work in a salon. But then yes, I had a college degree. I worked in a salon. I went to grad school and had a baby all at the same time. It's like, but that's my journey. That's that was what was for me. And dinner gets made at 10 o'clock at night. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
But that's my life. So letting people just live their lives the way that they need to live them. As long as everybody, to me, as long as everybody's safe, safety, beyond safety, pretty much. Just live your life the way you need to.
Hmm. Yeah, I think reframing a lot of that stuff has been so important for me since my diagnosis in terms of just how I looked at myself and even just that because I felt like there was that pendulum of the manic interest in things, the hyper focus, the manic energy when I was super into something and I'd stay up all night thinking about it, and then the lethargy and that kind of exhaustion that comes from not wanting to fold laundry or do some of these boring tasks I would get that paralysis. And so I definitely had that feeling of thinking I had bipolar, like I think a lot of women do before they're diagnosed, that swing. And now I'm so much more able to view myself as both of those sides of the pendulum, as opposed to what I used to do, which is only focus on the bad side and just be like, and I would only create my own identity out of all of the negatives. I never put value in the positives. I never saw them. They always seemed kind of random and without any sort of seeming pattern or impetus. And so the one thing I felt like I was always, it was more like, instead of a pendulum, it was almost more like a rubber band. Like I would get pulled into different directions, but my natural state was when the rubber band would get let go of, and I would be back to the couch in paralysis on my phone, thinking I was a horrible, lazy person. So the fact that I've sort of been able to look at the more like organic whole self and realize that you're not lazy, you're recharging. You just spent 12 hours researching some random topic that was fascinating to you, and now you need to recharge. And so a lot of that, I feel like a lot of my self-worth has improved so much just in the way I've been able to kind of redefine those moments. um gosh, there was something else too that you were talking about that I wanted to irk. I hate when that happens. I like, sometimes I try to take note. Oh, that's what it was. Um, the Have you noticed, since the pandemic, have you noticed, like, because I'm a pandemic diagnosis, have you noticed a proliferation of ADHD diagnoses this year? Because you were talking earlier about that kind of house of cards and the fact that we had it all, we were barely keeping everything together. And then it feels to me like that a lot of um, the way in which ADHD, which had been suggested to me over the years by my therapist, suddenly like really became meaningful to me after the pandemic. Anyway, my question is: have you noticed a proliferation this past year, and kind of what have your clients been telling you, or what do you feel like is the pattern, especially with women our age, especially with women of color? I mean, what's happening here, and do you feel like what is it about the society we're living in right now that's bringing this ADHD to the fore?
Well, you're right. I've had many people, that the realization of ADHD, or just coming even for mental health diagnoses, just that they feel like something's clearly wrong here. Now that we've had the pandemic, and there is all the different stressors that are different than the stressors that you normally even had. So sometimes when you're coping, even it might be barely, but you're coping with the stressors you're used to. Once all of those supports went away, then people were like, oh my goodness, they didn't know what to do. I will say the people clients I had that with anxiety or some with ADHD felt better because finally things had slowed down a bit and they were like, whew, I never thought I'd be able to do anything different because I didn't know how to change anything as
Mm,
long as things were really, really going quickly. Now they had a chance because everything stopped to take a breath, and then they were able to reorganize, and they have actually really thrived. It's been an up and down event because it's been much longer than anyone has thought, and we've got different messaging and different things happening in different places. But generally, um, the people that had some of these diagnoses actually have found that it's been a blessing in the fact that it gave them a chance to slow down. But many people have then just realized they have ADHD because that routine that you had that kind of kept it together, it just went away. And now, like I said, maybe your kid is home and you're teaching them, but you still have to work, or, oh, I can't even figure out how to order groceries because that's a lot of steps, right? Becomes a lot of steps that you're like, how come I can't get that done? So it's even things that seem that small that then made people say, hey, that time I thought about maybe I need a diagnosis, let me try to get one. Or, they sat down and maybe they heard, like I said, a podcast or read a blog or something and said, that's me. And now I have a chance to try to address this. Um, so I am very happy that people have just like taken that time to really realize that this is happening. Because again, once you address it, once you realize that this is it, you get education about it, then you can address it and live the life that you at least the life you choose. Then you have choices to make instead of having like your life run you, which a lot of women, I work mostly with Black women with ADHD. Many women feel like their life is running them. They're not running their lives because, when you don't have working memory, it's like, oh, I can't, remember that I had to do this thing and then I have to run and do that. And then I'm behind doing that. Oh, I made an obligation because, we women are always trying to take care of everything for everyone. It's like, oh, I forgot I had all these obligations. How can I do that? Because we people please. And then you wait to the time when it's all due because we're procrastinating, and they just didn't have time to really think about it. But once they had a chance to think about it and now they can address it, then they can start addressing all those things that kind of make you feel inadequate anyway, or just
mhm.
make you feel like you're drowning. So I have a huge increase in people finding out, or at least wanting to find out. Sometimes there's self-diagnosis. Um, that is a whole nother topic, but at least people are looking into it and then trying to get information and addressing it, which I think is really important. Because you don't have to live like this. You really don't have to live in a way where you don't feel comfortable.
Mhm. Yeah, I think so much of that grief around realizing the ADHD, comes from, as my therapist called it, that brick. She was like that, the realization of how hard you were in fact working, like, and that you were on this hamster wheel and you didn't even stop to notice that that's what was happening and that you were on there when other people weren't. And so my therapist calls it that brick, that this, you've been carrying it around, you've been working so much harder. And so, but then I think, some this goes back to my, I guess, my own devil and angel on my shoulder, which is like, is it really ADHD or is it just the trauma of being a bright woman living in a society that shuts you down for at every turn? Like I felt like as a feminist, you're told your whole life to just like, oh, be nice, be likable, stop, don't be so angry. And then I think about that from a Black woman's perspective and the angry Black woman stereotype, which is like, don't ever speak up for yourself. Anytime you speak up for yourself, you have to sort of manage what the perception of you is going to be. Like that is always this part and parcel with the already existing brick. So I'm curious, like, how does advocacy play for a Black woman when it comes to, knowing what you need, knowing what you need for your children? Um, how can you advocate for yourself when there's always that sense, like when we're still living in the kind of society where we are told to just stop being so angry, stop being so upset, stop being, just deal with it. And if you don't like it, it's your fault. I guess that's a big question. But I just mean, like, I feel like I get wrapped up in, like, why, I think it's all ties into that sense of, like, how much am I actually struggling, and how much do I need to advocate for myself versus how much do I need to just, like, shut up, put on a smile, and be likable in a awful patriarchal society.
Yeah. This is the big question, right? This is the big thing where, it is that where, there's misogyny that goes on. So you're right. It's like, you're told to be like a good girl and sit there. Yeah. Sit there and look pretty, right?
Mhm.
There's that. Or to do all this work in order to be, recognized and known. And then there's being a Black woman. So there's that on steroids, because then there's, some people code switch where it's like you have to kind of play to the room, like who's in the room, to know how you're going to figure out how you want to act in that particular space,
Yeah.
um, because of the way that you could be perceived. And then there's the ADHD part, which is the part that's invisible, right? So nobody knows. People see that I'm Black, you see that I'm a woman, but you don't know that I have ADHD. So when my desk is, disorganized, it's like, you're messy. If I'm late, then it's like, oh, well, of course she's late. And then maybe you won't get the project, or maybe they won't think that they can trust you. Uh, but in spades, like, there's no way sometimes to come back from something like that.
Mhm.
So there's, code switching, and then there's the masking. So trying to hide your ADHD, like, you don't want everybody to know. So you may overwork. We feel like, when we're Black, we have to work twice as hard to get half as far many times. But then you're going to have to overwork because you have ADHD. So it is tiring and maddening. And I always have like a bandwidth conversation with my clients. The only thing that we have is our bandwidth, right? So there's only a certain amount of it. And when you're using it to code switch, and then you're using it to mask, how much is left for you to actually be who you really are, and to get other things done? And that, to me, is where all of this is really insidious and takes a lot out on your self-worth, like I said. And that's when you're questioning and doubting yourself. And it's like, how do I get off of this wheel? It's a lot to consider. And people deal with it in many different ways, but it is, what happens in my life, and has happened in my life, and many women's lives every day, like having to navigate all of those waters. So that's why, I think that's what led me to advocacy. Because I didn't, I've only been diagnosed. Has it been 2 or 3 years? I don't even know. I guess obviously I don't keep up with dates, but uh, when I got diagnosed and I went to the big ADHD conference, the international conference, it was in Philly in 2019, and I was there on the professionals day, but I was helping someone else with a presentation they were doing, but I was just finding out about coaching. But when I was there in Philadelphia, which is a big city, in a big hotel for 4 days with them, I don't know how many breakouts, many, there weren't many Black people in space, and not many at all. I mean, a handful. Especially on the professionals day, there weren't Black people that were doing presentations. I think there was one, and maybe one the whole time. And I was like, this doesn't make sense, because
Mhm.
there are a lot of Black people out here with ADHD. I know that there are. It's not nothing else. Like, there's mothers or fathers. And when I started asking around, how come I don't see a lot of Black coaches here? No one could answer my question. And that's what set me on the road to advocacy, because I know that we're here, and I know there are coaches that are out there, but you just don't see them. It's like, I don't know if they didn't feel comfortable coming to that space, or whether there just aren't as many as I think. But I just know that we were out here, and that somebody needs to speak to the fact that a lot of our struggles are the same. Like, we see each other, like, that's why we gather in these groups, but we have a struggle that is different. Walking around, and as you can see with some of the events that have happened in the past year in this world, um, when you just the color of your skin can make you to be a weapon, it's scary. I have a Black son. It's really scary. So, the fact that that takes so much out of you on your day to day, and then you have to manage your ADHD. We need to come together, and we need to have people like us to be able to, if nothing else, manage just the feelings around that, protecting our bandwidth and being together. I refer to ADHD as like 1,000 little cuts, like death by 1,000 little cuts, because every time something happens, it hurts, it hurts, it hurts. We need the healing of community to be able to get through all of those cuts. So with that, like I decided to start an association for Black ADHD coaches, which I'm going to get off the ground sometime this fall, so that we can come together, be together for community and education. If people are looking for Black coaches, they'll know a place to find them, and then we can, take that movement and grow from there. But it's just very important because it's the life that we are living, and it's important to address it and look at it, and and realize this is here, this is what's happening, not sweep it under the rug, but to really look at it head on, and take care of each other in that way. And that, to me, that's the way that we make progress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's such an important distinction you made, where you say the symptoms of ADHD are the same in all of us, but the struggle that results from those symptoms is very, very different based on who we are in society and how we are perceived. And I think that's something we need to distinguish a lot more. And I think that association is fantastic and wonderful, and I'm glad it exists. Yeah. So, gosh, I'm sorry, I'm panicking at the time. Okay. So I'm going to skip over the what do you love most about your ADHD, unless you feel like there's a real something you wanted to talk specifically about.
No, I mean, I think we talked about, because I wrote down the question, but it's like the same thing, like strength and grit and determination. Like those are the parts that I love, the passion. I know I can work harder than probably any other person I know,
Mm-hmm.
when I'm passionate about it.
Yeah.
And the grit I got from 8 years of undergrad, it sounds horrific, and at some points, there was crying, but without that, I wouldn't be who I am today. Like that is what I stand upon. That, yeah, you know what, I can get through anything because I didn't stop. I kept going. And I think a lot of people, they'll stop, and I think that's the difference. You've got to keep going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's been so big for me, was when I was getting my diagnosis from the psychiatrist, and she mentioned, I was telling her all the ways in which I set my life up so that I'm not late, or so that I don't lose my keys, or all of these things. And she was like, wow, you work really, really hard. And I got all choked up because I felt like I had never heard that before, like that just was not my identity at all, was that I'd never thought of myself as coming across as somebody who worked hard to anyone before. So I guess, yeah, it's that same thing of like being able to recognize how much you have been doing all along is so important. And
Yeah.
now, if you could rename ADHD into a less problematic acronym, would you call it something else?
That is an interesting question. And I thought, I've heard this before, and I've thought about it before. And it's like, I don't have another name for it. What I would like is that we didn't have to have a name for it. The name obviously
Yes.
is problematic. It does not speak to what's going on for us at all. And it's in the DSM, and I'm not quite sure why. But if we just didn't have a name for it at all, that you're just having your own lived experience, like this is your experience, and being able to use the supports or just live your life in a way that works for you. So that there's a certain way that people think that thing should, with quotes, be done. And when you don't do that, then again, it's a character flaw, or there's something wrong with you. Where instead, it's like, let someone live their life. If I need to work, from 7 p.m. to like 7 a.m., and those are my good working hours, what does it matter as long as the work is done? It's not to say, oh, because you have to work 9 to 5, because that was always a thing for me, like at school. It's like, why are we here at 7 a.m.? I can't do anything at 7 a.m. You at 10 a.m., I'm fantastic. So, it's like, but letting people be who they are. When
Yeah.
I don't really take appointments before. I'll do 9:30, but I don't take anything at 7 unless it's an emergency because I'm not going to be any good to you. I will be great for you at 10:30, 11, or 3, right? So, but just having people being able to live the ways that is going to make them successful, or ask for what it is that you need. Many people ask about, should I disclose my ADHD? And so that's up to you. There's so many misperceptions out there. I always beg people to be careful, but to me it's like, ask for what you need. If you need a quiet space to get a report done, say, hey, if you need this report done, give me an hour. I'm going to bang this out in this room here, with the lights the way I need it and the desk the way I need it, and maybe some headphones, and here you go. Versus having to work in a big open office, with just somebody giving out, different things for you to do, and you're not even sure what they want, how they want it, where to start, and then you're in overwhelm, and then you're feeling bad yourself. Things that happen, you feel bad about yourself. Whereas if you could just be who you are, we don't have to have a label for it. You can either ask for what you need, or people just accept you for who you are. If I'm not looking at you in your eyes, it's not because I don't care or I'm dismissive. It's because sometimes for people, all that eye contact is a lot. If you want me to hear you, it's actually better for me if my eyes are closed. But
Mhm.
I've learned to get along in society, I better look you straight in the eye or at your nose. But why should I have to do that? So if society could just let people be who they are and allow that to dictate how they're successful, I'm sure most people would be far more successful. And yeah, we wouldn't have as many mental health diagnoses
Oh my
because they
goodness.
wouldn't have all that shame that goes with it. And I think a lot of the shame is what um, is about most of the diagnoses for therapy. That's how I feel about that one. I'll get on my
Yeah.
soapbox and we'll be on for 3 hours.
No, I love that perspective because it's so true. And it was so articulate in terms of that idea of like the onus should not be on the individual to conform to meet the standards of the classroom or the 9 to 5 or whatever it is. Like the structure should be able to expand to meet the individual and they're at their in the way in which they can best function. And I feel like our entire society, especially public school and public education, are the set up in the exact opposite way, which is like you said, even with with our kids, like the onus is on the family, the onus is on the individual to help and work hard and get all of the additional resources so that your child can get shoved into this box and perform as well as they can before they're put out into the 9 to 5 job work world or whatever it is that's awaiting them next, as opposed to saying like how can we expand the classroom to meet the needs of everybody. And yeah, that was beautiful. I love that. Thank you. Just blow up the
Thank
system, that's
you.
it. um,
I don't think it's that hard, to tell you the truth. It's just like, expand a little bit. I think they'd be
yeah,
surprised at how much easier it would be for everyone.
yeah. Oh, all right. So now for anybody who wants to find you and work with you, I know you're at ingershaye.com, INGERSHAYE.com. Is that the best place to reach you, or where can people find you on the internet?
Well, that's my website, ingershaye.com. I'm at Ingershaye on Twitter and Instagram. I have a Facebook. My Facebook page is Black Women with ADHD. And the association that's coming is the International Association of Black ADHD Coaches.
Awesome. And you have a Facebook group too. Do you still operate the
I
Facebook
do.
group
I
for
have a
Black women?
Facebook. I Yes, I have a Facebook group that is Black Women with ADHD Executives and Entrepreneurs.
Awesome.
So thank you for reminding me. I have that too.
I know we always have our fingers in too many pots. Well, thank you so much, Inger. It's been so
I wrote it down.
wonderful.
I thought I had all of them. I didn't. Yeah, this was a pleasure. It was such a pleasure. I'm actually so happy to meet you and to connect with you, because like I said, I've listened to your podcast. And I was just listening to it before we started. But I listened to your podcast, so I was just like really honored when you asked me to come on.
Oh, awesome. I love that. I love how symbiotic these relationships are because I just was so excited to pick
Yeah.
your brain for an hour. So